So I'm Bob Shannahan, and I've done many things in life. The latest thing I'm doing is making these animals. It started out as a hobby, and now it's become a compulsion. And I work here at the Machire in the morning as the custodian, and I open the place up. So it's a really nice fit. I've been working with art, I guess, a lot all my life. Whenever I need to do something, I make it. So I consider this more making things rather than art. So it's on and off, and I've been working on these animals for about 10 years now. I started with the mammoth, and it took quite a while. It was just kind of an experiment. Then I made the second animal, and somewhere between the second and third animal, I guess you could call me obsessive compulsive. It came out. I don't know if you've ever seen a guy working on a boat in his front yard. You go by every spring and he's still working on it, and you go, God, what a turkey. And then it turns out I'm that turkey too. I'm still working on them. So I'm always asking myself why this project started, and I think it was a basic human feeling of fairness. And I kind of felt that the dinosaurs got all the press. They had all the Rex appeal. And the mammals were kind of an unknown area. So after building two animals, I realized that I was on track to show all the 65 million years of animal evolution. So I ended up with 8 animals, and they pretty much cover the periods. So you have an idea you want to try to make these things. You have no idea how they're going to turn out. So you go, how am I going to make fur? Certainly don't have the money to buy old pieces of fur. So I'm traveling along in the autumn, and I just noticed in the fields the color and texture of the brush, and so that I go, well, that might do. So I experimented with it, and it actually, it's funny. The autumn colors of all the vegetation, they kind of match all different colors of fur. So having that insight was fun, and then actually making it just is very laborious. So a lot of people want to know too how they're made. So I whipped up this sequence here of the Telodont being made using photographs. And a lot of these animals are like little micro architecture. You have to art part of the building, and then you have to do the structural engineering part. How's it actually going to stand up? So starting out with this photograph of Entelodont fossils reconstructed, I go on the left here, I go over and I play around with tinfoil and clay and trying to get a pose going that kind of moves me. And it was a really irascible animal, so I got a kind of an angry, distracted pose. And then over to the right, I have to figure out how I'm going to make the frame. So there's a little frame of the animal. And then it all comes together, and how am I going to cover it? So I have to figure out how to cover it and use all sorts of wire and sheet metal for that. And then moving along farther here, have to build the frame up. You can see where it's welded. Use plywood discs for the knees and the elbows. Moving right along, start covering it with birch. This layer of birch is the hardest part of it, strapping on this layer of birch. And when the head is made out of big blocks of styrofoam, it takes a long time to get this. This was the hardest head out of all the animals to do. And then the final part is taking a brush, which I collected in the fall, and sticking a brush between the birch. And that's how it's held on. So there's 8 sculptures here. And they're kind of chronologically arranged from starting 65 million years ago when dinosaurs died out, and right up to the present. So people go, well, what's the big deal? What's the connection? And it's that things that happened back then are affecting us now. I think the favorites are the little horses, especially the first horse I made. I could take it with me. I don't have a cat or a dog. I don't have to feed it. So that's kind of fun. And then the camel's very female and gracile, and I like that because it's different from all the others. And I've noticed that, incidentally, the women really like these animals and move by them. And I think it's because they're big and hairy, it reminds them of men. And the best part, you don't have to talk to them. So the dinosaurs go extinct 65 million years ago, and the planet's very hot, very warm, and very jungly. And so the first animal that kind of has a foot in both worlds is the giant bird, the diatryma. And if you squint at it, you can almost, and you take away the feathers and put scales in its place, you can almost see a small Tyrannosaurus rex. And that was hanging around for the 10 million years after the dinosaurs went extinct. And it preyed on these little horses. And you can see how small they were. That's how small horses were 50 million years ago. And they kind of hung out in the shade, in the jungle. And that's why they're colored the way they are. And it took 50 million years for them to grow up to be the size they are today. So that takes us up to about 30 million years ago, 35 million years ago. And the planet starts changing at this point. Antarctica settles over the South Pole and the water gets colder and the planet starts getting colder. And the jungles have gone and it's more open savanna now and parkland. So mammals are getting bigger and more diverse. And the entelodon's a good example of that. It's kind of like a Franken animal. It's got a mouth or a head like an alligator. It's got feet like a pony. It's just an interesting animal, one of nature's experiments. And then 20 million, we're up to 20 million years ago, and the grass has evolved now. That's the big change. The planet's cooler and there's grass everywhere. So you start getting all these tremendous herds of animals. And the camel is an interesting choice because the camels pretty much originated in America, which was a big surprise to me. And this particular camel evolved a long neck to reach up to the top of trees and exploit that. So it's kind of our American equivalent of a giraffe. And that brings us up to 5 million years ago. At this point, the climate zones on the planet are getting stratified. You have an Arctic and a temperate, subtropical and a tropical. South America has joined North America, and it's getting quite a bit colder. And this bear, the short-faced bears, were a family of bears that were way before the three types of bears we have in North America now. And they were huge, and this question of whether they were carnivores or omnivores. And they probably did a lot of scavenging. They had big long legs so they could cover a lot of territory. And they had a huge nose, which sniffed out probably carrion. So they would arrive at a kill and they would swat everything else out of the way. And of course the last period is the Ice Age, the last 2 million years. And the mammoth is an example of a super specialized animal. It has really long fur. And that was the first animal I made. And to some extent, they more or less were here. That's the thing that blew my mind. A lot of these animals are right here in New Hampshire and Vermont. And the reason we don't find many fossils is the East Coast fossils go up about as far as New Jersey, and that's where the big ice sheet stopped. And there was a mammoth tooth found in Vermont, and last 2 years, one in New Hampshire. And here we are at the present. And this whole project could be titled Fur, too. It's the evolution of fur versus scales.